Hello? So we're now going to focus on 40-50 Warren Street.
You want to?
Sure.
Thank you. So we have two more presentations. 40-50. Hello, everyone. We're going to start in 40-50. 40-50 Warren Street. We have two applicants for this site. The first is New Urban Collaborative, and then the second is Nuestra Comunidad. So we're going to start in with New Urban Collaborative's plan. 15-minute presentation, 15-minute comment and questions. Thank you.
If anyone has come in since the last presentation and didn't get a handout, I'm going to take a stack of our flyers and leave them on the back table for you to pick up on your own during the presentation.
So you might remember us from the 2147 presentation that we just gave. So our plan for 40-50 Warren is also part of our overall plan for the neighborhood. And I will begin by saying that we are going to be the first tenant at 40-50 Warren. That's where we plan to establish our business because we intend to be part of this neighborhood. What we plan to do there is involve local partners who are innovation people, young business people, entrepreneurs who are looking for co-working and office space below market. That is the first component of our development. There are also affordable units that Ryan will speak to. But again, our intention is to involve retail, office. The office will be co-working space to local businesses who frankly can't afford or find space in the neighborhood. So I'll turn it over to Ryan.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Again, my name is Ryan Link. I'm a principal at the New Urban Collaborative and a partner at Zephyr Architects. I think most of you were here for the last version of this presentation that we just gave, but I'll run through a couple of quick things that are key components of our vision for the area. Specifically, with regard to our team right now, I mentioned in the last presentation that we're engaging Graffito and supervisions. Supervisions will be heavily involved in the 2147 site as they are a work-live consultancy. Graffito SP is going to be very involved with the 40-50 Warren building as retail is their forte, and they really work to activate the ground level of neighborhoods and of buildings. Same team as prior, Samira from NV Energy, Greg Janey from Janey Construction, and Phil Colleran from CRJA IBI Group. So as we looked at the 40-50 site as part of the set piece that I described earlier, one thing that is very important to us with this one is that these buildings are going to exist in your neighborhood, not on your neighborhood. And this building is considerably different from the 2147, not just in scale and programming, but in the way that it is in the neighborhood. The 2147 building is kind of a part of its own conversation. It has a courtyard in front of it. It faces a blank wall on a couple of instances, and it sets deep back into the plan of the neighborhood. This building at 40-50 is right on the street, and it's visible directly from Dudley Square, directly from Dudley Station, from almost everywhere as you're in the proximity of it. And the corners of the building are incredibly important. As such, on the site, between the Palladio building, which is here, and 40-50, there's actually a gap between the buildings that we're pulling back away from Palladio, specifically so that we can activate a space, and I'll talk more about that as I get deeper into the presentation. again, this is another instance where we're trying to mask the building with sensitivity to what's around it. You'll notice that the Palladio building is a certain height. We're mandating that the base of our building, which contains the office and workspaces and also the retail ground floor spaces, be consistent with what the Palladio building is setting up to the corner. We're situating the residential block of our building, which is a 3-story cube on top, back and away from both of the streets so that there's a clear datum that reads in the neighborhood as consistent with the historic fabric of Dudley Square. Once again, our neighborhood plan involves the activation of 3 key gateways across the site and then a number of green nodes throughout, in particular the one here at the Balling building where the roads diverge from one another. Specific to the 4050 building, the corner that it sits on, as well as the corner between this building that we're in now and Dudley Station, are very important moments that we feel we will spend a lot of energy and a lot of effort enhancing and making more safe, again, to provide that sense of safety and neighborhood ownership that will allow businesses to flourish. One of the things we heard when we attended different meetings, but in particular one Black Market meeting, was that residents in the area don't particularly feel able to engage with the businesses that are here currently, and it's a big proponent, or it's a big reason why things that are here now don't stick around very long. And we're hoping that by really addressing the street in an aggressive and intensive way, we can set up a situation where retail and office and arts programming is allowed to really thrive. So moving into the building, we've seen all this already in the last presentation. Again, the massing of the building sets the residential piece back and away from the street. We're imagining a retail and restaurant base to the building that features local first engagement. We are imagining a carved away corner on both edges of the building that engages with the view corridors around it, as well as on this corner an entry space into the 2 floors on floors 2 and 3 that contain office and business incubation spaces and co-working spaces. That will come down to the ground level and meet the ground on that corner, and it will be surrounded by retail programming. I mentioned earlier how we're addressing the Palladio building side of our new building, specifically at the ground. We are pulling back from the Palladio building in order to allow an entrance into the residential lobby to go up to floors 4 through 6. And what that affords us is a way of activating this alley space, which is currently there, and it's currently occupied by garbage cans and other things that aren't so nice, with 24/7 street level activation of people coming in and out of their residences. To reinforce that, we're suggesting an art wall and a backstop to the space that will be programmed by the community and by the various arts organizations that we're engaging at 2147 and in this building. And finally, a restaurant or cafe space on the corner here, which can spill out into that space, both on the sidewalk and in the alleyway, to reinforce the activity that happens there, providing a lot of light, a lot of transparency, eyes on the street at all hours of the day, so that this building really addresses those problems that I mentioned earlier. Once again, we have the co-working entrance on the corner facing Dudley Square, leading up into 2 floors of programming specifically involving co-working spaces, incubation, and other types of retail generators and business generators. Again, we have this concept on the 2nd floor of there being a kind of urban room that we imagine being a living room for these incubation and co-working spaces, but also a space that provides an iconic vision of the building to the Dudley Square transit stop, and also kind of monumental space right on the street. Once again, this is a double height space. We're planning on bringing the materiality of the building on the exterior down into this space so that we connect the podium level of the building with the levels of the building above, which you can see in this view standing in Dudley Square looking toward the corner. There's that entrance into the co-working space, up into that living room space that I mentioned, with the material qualities and the window pattern from above coming down into the space. A masonry body to the building consistent with the Palladio building in type as well as in mass. And then once again, an active retail edge along the street. One important point worth mentioning of both this building and 2147, but especially important to this one, is the notion of being LEED Platinum. The reason we decided to go beyond what the RFP required, the RFP required, I think, LEED Silver for both buildings. We contemplated going LEED Gold, but as we looked at the LEED situation and what it actually sets up, we came to a realization pretty quickly that LEED Platinum would allow us to provide a dramatically lower operating cost to the residential units above and beyond LEED Gold, which is kind of a break-even point. So our decision to go LEED Platinum isn't just a move that we made because LEED Platinum sounds great. It's something that we really feel adds value to the building and brings the opportunity for the micro units that are in that living space to be actually affordable as an operating principle. So I'd like to see if Jeffrey or Samira have anything further that they'd like to add. And I think we're shortening on the time a little bit on this one because we discussed a lot of the urban design principles and landscape principles prior. So I think that'll leave a couple extra minutes for question and answer from you folks. Great.
Great, so we can have a couple more minutes for the comment and question. Thank you very much. Any comment, questions? John?
I just got two questions. First, on the, I saw some plans or pictures of bike lanes. Is there in fact a plan to put bike lanes on Washington, Warren, and Ruggles streets?
Yes, to all three. Okay.
It's a little, I don't know if you've noticed how tight it is. Sometimes you can't even get cars going both ways on Washington Street, especially if there's a little snow on the ground. So by a bike lane, I know some places in Boston, they just say, well, bike and cars share the lane. Is it that kind of thing, or a dedicated bike lane?
So there are precedents for this all over the South End in particular, where streets are the same width, and we've taken a look at the street section from curb to curb and what's allowed there. There are instances around this building in particular where dedicated bike lanes are possible, and also at either end of the site. We might have to resort to sharrows, but our goal is to stay away from sharrows and to have dedicated bike lanes. If not sequestered from street traffic, at least divided by a line, so that there's a designated place. Yeah.
Just one last question, and I really, bike lanes would be awesome around here. Anything to alleviate traffic. So on one of your other slides, it said that the economic leakage must stop, and I totally agree with that too. But rent is a form of economic leakage, and you guys aren't providing any home ownership opportunities. So just two quick questions. Why can't we provide home ownership opportunities, whether affordable or not? And B, how are we reinvesting that rent that's coming in back into the community? Thank you.
Yeah, the reality of it is, there are a number of factors that we try to incorporate into putting our best proposal forward, and I simply couldn't make a project work that involved condominiums on the site. So one thing that has come up, John, I think you've been at a number of these meetings, that I do intend to figure out with the community is how we involve the community in ownership of property. It's going to be, part of our business going forward if we're here. But to the extent that as part of, my development plan, I could figure out how we incorporate ownership, rental, retail, office, it didn't work.
Linda, why don't you come up and then we'll have Sophia.
Question. How will you handle the wide load flatbed trailers coming in for construction?
So I'm guessing that's a question about construction staging and where we're going to put things. So it's obviously going to be a little more difficult on the Warren site than it will be on the 2147 site, because there isn't effectively empty space, you know, on two of the sides as there is on 2147. Also, the street's not as wide here, and it's an intersection. So your question is a good one. Our anticipated staging zone will be behind the building on the opposite side of Warren Street, in the parking lot that's currently behind the Chinese restaurant. There's space back there, not only in the parking lot, but at the back side of our parcel. You'll notice in the plan right here, the back edge of our building sits back from the property line a few feet. There's a loading alley back here, so some of that space will be available for staging. But then there's also, like I said, some potential back here in the parking lot behind the Chinese restaurant.
Sophia, you want to come?
There you go.
Hi, Sophia Transtamar again. I have a few questions. In your proposal, you mentioned an intention of benefiting to include seniors wishing to live in Dudley Square as a result of coming up with the micro and one-bedroom units. Can you explain how you are going to move forward with trying to set aside or market to seniors? My other question is related to this concept of change-based organizations you identified in your proposal. Can you explain exactly what you are identifying as change-based organizations to utilize the commercial spaces within the building? And then I appreciate your ability to think about nodes within the Dudley Square area that are points of entry and exit. Currently, right now, the city of Boston is in phase 1 of Dudley Complete Streets, which includes a large section of the streets and sidewalks that your development has identified for areas that you will develop, as well as the Ruggles Street redesign, which is scheduled to go into construction next year. Can you explain a little bit more in detail what your collaboration is with the city and how your proposed enhancements are either duplicate or complementary to what the city has already been working on for the past several years?
Thanks for that. So we'll take your questions kind of in reverse order. With regard to the Complete Streets and the Ruggles redevelopment initiatives that are ongoing, we're complementary to those. I think that's a great way to put it. We're following by all of the mandates that Complete Streets has set up. The things that we're adding to that are materials choices such as permeable pavers, rain gardens, ways of dealing with stormwater runoff that are important, that are not aggressively directed by Complete Streets. We're also looking at things like Wi-Fi hubs that exist at those node locations. We're looking at arts initiatives to involve elements of not only active art making, but placemaking through reflection on Dudley Square's history, through the art that gets put into the streets, into the areas in the streets that we're addressing. And on the Ruggles site in particular, the Ruggles issue, the Ruggles initiative, focuses more heavily, I think, on the police station side up on Columbus. And it doesn't carry as much weight moving back as we'd like it to. And we think that there's an opportunity to call out the location of Dudley Square to the Ruggles T station in particular. When you get off the train at Ruggles, as you all know, you have no idea that Dudley Square is here. And we'd like there to be signage. We'd like there to be some notion of, you know, not just a nicer street, but an identification of a place beyond where you are when you get on and off the T.
And just to quickly speak to the senior housing component, you guys as part of the community are going to be our best resource. You know, and as I mentioned, we intend to have anyone and everyone who wants to be involved and help us along the way to help. You know, obviously between senior living and, you know, and other organizations who are here on the ground, there are plenty of seniors who are looking for housing or would like to stay here. And, you know, we intend to, you know, to do what we can to involve them. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. The other question was. Yes. Well, there are a few. One is that they be local. The second aspect of that is that in terms of change base, that that ideally they have a social or enterprising goal that's directly related to to being a positive business. That doesn't necessarily mean a not-for-profit, but it means that we can have goals to bring about positive change, and also do well. Do good and do well can coexist. So to that end, I'm whether it's working with Ujima or working with Black Market or working with other organizations who are here who I believe are doing those things, that's that's how we intend to do it.
Question or comment? Hussein?
So my question is, how do you guys plan to deal with the traffic during and after after the construction? Because of Dudley is gonna be a huge traffic, and so that's gonna be another addition of the traffic. So can you address that issue?
So again, the laydown areas and the different zones that we're going to be looking at for this building and the other one are in parking lots and areas off the street as much as possible. We will try to load in and load out early in the morning, late in the evening, so that we're not coming in during rush hour and backing everything up. I know there's already a huge problem with traffic here. In addition to that, the city owns a number of parcels in and around Dudley Square. We're hoping we can gain access to those sites as laydown areas for storage as well, so that, again, we're not putting dumpsters on the street any more than necessary. There will have to be some, demolition phases where things might bleed out a little bit, but we're sensitive to that, and we'll also follow all of the normal guidelines that the city has for maintaining operable streets and safe construction sites and police details and everything else.
Chuck?
In your response to the question in the RFP regarding the good job standards, you say that you'll be an exception because you're going to only be bringing small businesses in. When I looked at the commercial space, you have 11,550 square feet for office and co-worker space. Could you explain more in terms of how that space is going to be used?
Sure. Part of our intention in sort of leaving that undecided was that it would be flexible. If you imagine, for those of you who are familiar with WeWork, for instance, or other co-working space, we want to be able to accommodate businesses and individuals who are interested in being part of the building. So, fortunately, and Ryan can speak to the design, but it allows that space to be flexible based on the needs of the appropriate people and businesses who will come.
So there'll be multi-business.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, that's our intention. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so we conclude this portion of the review for 4050 Warren Street. Thank you very much, Team New Urban Collaborative. And why don't we then transition to the next and final application, and that would be New Western Community. Dad, why don't you come up? We'll get set up and we'll roll.